Welcome, dear students. The current session is about South Asian English as imperialistic legacy and regional asset. I hope by the end of the session you would be able to understand how it is an imperialistic legacy and how simultaneously it is a regional asset as well. Well, my dear students, if we trace the history back and if we look at how historically languages have developed in South Asia and how there had been imperialistic influences through the history, it is very interesting to know that before the arrival of English, we have a long history of this imperialism in South Asia. In fact, in the second millennium BC, speakers of Old Indo-Aryan came into South Asia from the northwest, present day, what we call Afghanistan. And they spread out southwards and eastwards, partly by peaceful settlements, but largely by force of arms. In a few hundred years, the invaders, they had spread all over this region of Indus Valley, what we call the Indus civilization as well, and what actually makes Sindh of today's Pakistan. They also reached modern Bihar, Bengal, and even they migrated to Sri Lanka. The use of their language in the form of Sanskrit came to this land, and Sanskrit actually persisted to exist here for quite a long time after that. In fact, it even persists till today. In the form of its descendants, the modern Indo-Aryan languages, Indo-Aryan is, we find many languages. Indo-Aryan is the mother tongue of a large proportion of the population of every country in South Asia. So, if we trace ancestry of the local languages and dialects and vernaculars, many of them would have their roots in Sanskrit language of Indo-Aryan people. However, Sanskrit itself as a superposed language is the clearest linguistic legacy from this early imperialism as we look at the history of this whole region and the history of the subcontinent, what we call Hindustan sometimes as well. And actually, it relates to Hinduism as well, the religion. As Sanskrit relates to Hinduism, in the same way Persian relates to Islam in this area, and it is closely associated with the presence of Muslims and later on the Mughal rule in this area. The coming of Islam to South Asia is generally dated to 711 CE, when an Arab naval force entered what is now Pakistan from Arabian Sea and conquered the Indus Valley. I hope you know the history of Muhammad bin Qasim coming to Sindh and thus conquering all this area. This incursion probably didn't introduce the use of Persian. However, with the raids of Mahmud of Ghazni in the 11th century, Persian language came to this area. Although at one point Mahmud officially reintroduced Arabic as the language of the area, but if we look at the history of this area, Arabic did not flourish here as a language in use. It was only Persian that came in later and that flourished here as a language that was used by people, especially the ruling class of the Islamic State here. Persian continued to be the chief court language of the successive Muslim kingdom, and the Mughal Empire actually used it for quite a long time. In all its polities, Persian was a major and often the dominant language, despite all other languages that were being used, the vernaculars that were being used. Limited uses of this Persian language still they have persisted until the very recent times. It's only very recently that it has faded away and we do not find its use. If you just go, say, a century back, in the subcontinent you would find its use. Rather, those who would be educated, they would be considered to have mastery over the language. The Portuguese arrived in South Asia around 1500, and they also brought some imperialistic impact, bringing with them both military forces and Christian missionary zeal as well. They first landed in Sri Lanka in 1505, and this is from where they started their conquests. They captured Goa in 1510. So, I'm taking you back in the history where, different imperialistic influences had impact on language choices in this area. The Portuguese East Indies lasted over 100 years in Sri Lanka and 450 years on the mainland, although their trade and military power declined sharply, late in the late 18th century. So the result of all this was that the Portuguese language came to be used in South Asia far beyond the Portuguese colonial territories, and it even today survives in Sri Lanka. So till this point, what we draw as a conclusion is that this imperialistic legacy still persists in the whole South Asian region, be it the impact of Sanskrit on Hindi language, or on the Hindi culture, or on the Hinduism, Hindu religion, or be it Persian and its impact on Islam and the Muslim lifestyle and culture, or be it the Portuguese impact on the Sri Lankan socio-cultural context. All of these still persist. The coming of English to South Asia is traditionally dated to December 31, 1600, when Queen Elizabeth I granted a charter to some merchants in London, giving them a monopoly on trade with India. I hope you know the history of East India Company and coming to the subcontinent and getting settled here. So, the second date that is customarily mentioned in this connection, when especially it comes to the spread of English language, it is February 2nd, 1835, the date of passage of the famous minute of Lord Macaulay, who recommended the use of English language in the subcontinent. Had he not done that, maybe the history of language in the subcontinent in general, and the history of English language in specific in this area would have been completely different. The third date that we need to remember in this regard is of decision that was made on December 16th, 1967, when the Indian Lok Sabha adopted the Official Language Act, which legalized the use of English in addition to Hindi as an official language for India. As far as Pakistan is concerned, there had always been controversy, and for almost the first 30 years of the existence of Pakistan, there had always been, a clash between whether English should be the official language or Urdu should be the official language. It was only during the times of Ziaul Haq that Urdu was prioritized, but it was only for a while, and actually it did not work out. And the subsequent, rulers of the country, the leaders of the country, they preferred to stick to English language as an official language. When we look at all these, stages of this development and spread of English, the first stage was the use of English in direct relation to British trade, missionary, and politico-military activities in India. And if we continue tracing this history, the second stage in the subcontinent was where English was used in purely Indian contexts. And when I say Indian, it means both India and Pakistan contexts, for education, commerce, and for interlingual communication between or among more than two communities. The third stage is the official recognition stage of this language as an official language and as a necessary language for link of, independent states of India and of Pakistan with the rest of the world. Somewhat similar stages of development we can notice in all the other South Asian countries like Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Nepal, etc. So, this combination of what I would say the imperialistic influence and the local, impact of the local languages or the native languages. This is what forms what today English is in this region.